So earlier this year, I could barely go on a 5 kilometer run without feeling like I was ready to fall apart and like completely fall apart. Seriously, 5 kilometers was the absolute max that I was sticking to. And even then, it felt like my body was quitting before I even reached the halfway point. You see, I never really saw myself as a runner, and I definitely didn't look like what I had imagined runners were supposed to look like. And yet, somehow, a few months later, I had completed not one, but two 10-kilometer events. And then here's the kicker, I had a 5 minute improvement between the two runs. Like 5 minutes. If you ask any runner, like that is insane. And now I'm actually thinking about a half marathon, which is even more insane. And the thought alone is just still wild to even think that I'm considering this. So in this episode, I want to give you the story, right? Like the insights of how running basically helped me to rebuild the confidence in myself, how it helped me to support and to reconnect with my purpose as a dad, and how it forced me to push through limits I didn't even realize I had placed on myself. And listen, I'm here to be honestly fully transparent about what all this has taught me, not only about identity, but about pain too, and about what consistency really looks like, and how almost one overlooked moment with my son helped me to realize just how far I had come. And just in case you are new here, my name is Andy, and I'm the host of this podcast, the Body of Work podcast. I'm a dadpreneur. I'm working to build something meaningful, to stay fit, to show up in the best way that I can for my family. And I'm doing this so I can become the best version of myself, not only for them, but for me as well. And this podcast is my way of documenting all of it, the whole journey, the messy middle, as I like to call it, which is the raw, unfiltered middle that doesn't always get talked about. And definitely it doesn't always, get glorified. But that's where I feel like the real magic happens. Okay. Let's get into it. So if we go all the way back, I've always been big on basketball. Like before the age of 10, basketball was my sport. And I fell in love with it very early, and I played it throughout, my teens, and I got pretty good, if I may, say so myself. And because basketball demands a certain level of conditioning, because of the sprint and the short sprints, attacking with the basketball on offense, going back on defense, that constant back and forth, I always assumed I was in good shape. And I was in good shape, right? But even back then, I'd say when I was in my 20s, but whenever it came time to warming up, and then especially on a treadmill, even 5 minutes of running, it just didn't sit well with me. It just didn't sit right with me. I felt out of sync. I felt like I was gassed, winded in no time. And if I'm being honest, it was quite boring. It was really boring. Like that long, steady, state kind of movement. It just didn't give me the adrenaline that basketball gave me, those quick movements. So I started to form this story in my head early on, which was, I'm not a runner. I'm not built for this. I'm good at shorter distances, but long distances just isn't in it for me. And honestly, what I would tell myself is that it's boring. And that's what I told myself for years, for all of these years. And at that time, I had also gotten heavily into fitness, with a bunch of guys. So you started getting a bit heavier as well. So we did the gym sessions, the lifting, the need to be big and to get muscular, the whole thing, the whole shebang. So we'd hit the gym hard. And I remember before getting into those, lifting sessions at the gym, we jump on the treadmill to warm up. And that was kind of like our cardio. And like I said, I'd be gassed. Honestly, I'd be like, what is this? And to make matters worse, I'd start to have issues with my knees, feeling like an old man in my 20s, in my later 20s. Like, just imagine that, right? You're 20s, but you're feeling like you're 60. But yeah, all those years of playing basketball on on concrete, outdoors, indoor floors, the jumping, the landing, that constant stress on your knees, like that was starting to catch up to me. And by the time I hit my 30s, I felt like my knees were completely wrecked. I tried running then. I tried, some running now and then, but the next day it was straight pain, like walking down the stairs sideways kind of pain, like walking down the stairs and you literally got to put your 2 feet next to each other and you got to go one step at a time kind of pain. Like it was so bad. So yeah, between, the mindset blocks of this running thing isn't for me, and then the physical part of the pain, which was, my knees can't take this, I basically ruled out running, and especially the long distance. I th- I thought to myself it wasn't gonna happen. It's not worth the pain. It's not for me. But the truth is, a lot of that narrative wasn't really based on facts. It was based more on fear. It was the fear of pain. It was the fear of failure, the fear of confirming, some limiting beliefs that I had somehow, you know, about running and what running was supposed to mean and what it might do. And on some level, I didn't want to feel like I was trying and failing. So then it became easier to just not try at all. To kind of stay in my lane where I kind of look strong already, but I wasn't really pushing, for those limits anymore, those deeper limits. And if you're listening to this and you're probably nodding like, yep, and you're thinking, yeah, I feel what you're saying, bro, then maybe, just maybe, you've got something like that too. Some part of your identity where you've already written the story and closed the book. Saying things like, nah, this isn't for me, or I could never. But, and this is a big but what if it could be you again, right? What if the only thing standing between where you are and where you could be is just a willingness to start small again, to reframe the story that you kind of like concocted in your head, and then really give yourself that chance to find out what would happen if you stayed consistent. Because that's basically what happened for me next. Because now finally, this year, being 37, I had this wild idea, to pick up running again with the wreck knees, right? Not because I suddenly loved it, not because I was chasing a runner's high or something. It was far from any of these things. It was because something deeper was missing for me. You see, back when I played basketball, even, when I moved to the Netherlands, I never made it to the pros or anything, right? But I still had this dream, this vision of my family, my daughter, my son, my wife sitting courtside, watching me do something that I trained for, something that I gave my energy to, something that I showed up for, even on days I didn't want to, or in the moments that I may have doubted myself. And for a brief moment, I got a glimpse of that. And it was sometime last year or maybe the year before that I joined a local basketball team. And so I started practicing with the team, showing up, getting into it again. But long story short, and I'm gonna spare you the details, me and the coach, we basically didn't vibe. We couldn't see eye to eye. And I wasn't about to spend all this time training and sacrificing family time, because that was happening, just to sit on the bench. So I basically left. And with that, that dream of having my kids watch me, perform, to see their dad train for something and then show up for it on game day, like in the weekends, it felt like it was gone. And now around that time as well, a lot was going on. A lot wasn't really going as planned. And I made a video actually going a bit more into detail about that stuff, that wasn't going so well. And so I'll tag it somewhere in the video here. If you're listening on an audio or Spotify or so, I'll put it in the description notes. But the short story is that I was, I'm in the process, or at the time I was trying to build a business, and still am, and things weren't really panning out how I was expecting it to. So I was trying to keep it all together, but truthfully, my confidence had taken a big hit, a big one. So I knew I needed something to challenge those beliefs, limiting beliefs that I was having, something to help me rebuild, that trust in myself. And yeah, I was already doing kettlebell training workouts and high intensity training. So it wasn't like I was inactive on the fit front, right? But I wanted to build and work on my endurance, that long haul discipline, the kind that it conditions you physically, but it also conditions you and pushes you mentally. And I see these guys on YouTube and Instagram, and they'll be in their 40s and in their 50s, 60s, running 10Ks, half marathons, even full marathons, triathlons. And it's not that I was trying to compare, although that's kind of what was happening on the background. I mean, yeah, we're all human. But at the same time, there was a part of me that whispered, yo, but if they can do it, why not me? Right? Why not you? So that's when I decided, okay, let me start small, once a week, just 5 kilometers. And let me tell you, those first few runs were freakishly tough. It was insane how much pain, how hard they were. But I basically stuck with it, did it for some weeks, couple months. And then a friend of mine, an acquaintance, he told me that he was signing up for a running event. And he told me that having an actual race to train for, it kind of gave him a sense of purpose, a target to train for. And boom, that's when it hit me like, this could be it for me this time, right? This could be, my new basketball, my new arena, something to train for, something my family could come out, watch, support, but also be inspired by. And it was a place to show up again, to model something again. So I signed up for my 10K, and I had maybe 4 or 5 weeks to prepare for it, but I didn't decide to just go all crazy, right? I said, let me just stick to the training that I was doing once a week. And with every run, I'll push myself a little bit more. Every time I kept extending the distance. It wasn't no fancy plan. It wasn't no coach. It was just effort and a belief that I could make this happen. So my official goal that I had set for myself was simple. I just wanted to finish the race without passing out and, kind of like without stopping. My secret goal, and this is, to blame the competitor side inside of me, was to finish under 60 minutes. So then race day came, my family was there, my kids were watching, and I crossed the finish line, 58 minutes and 25 seconds. Boom. That moment meant more than I could have imagined, because it wasn't just about the time. It was about reclaiming a part of me that I thought I had lost, that confidence. And the bonus was seeing the happiness, the joy, the excitement, loving my kids and my wife's faces. When I passed them alongside the route that I was running, I'd hearing their cheers, like, Papa, we love you. Hearing that along the way, the feeling I had of I'm giving them core memories, of what persistence looked like. It just meant everything to me coming together in that moment. And I was finally giving my kids something that they could see me train for, right? To show up and to compete. And one of the biggest reasons I needed my kids to see me run, to see me train and to see me show up was because I wanted to become a living example. I wanted to become their living example. There's this mantra that I've been teaching my son since he was, I think, like 3 years old. And now my daughter, and my son is now 8, and my daughter, she is turning 5, and I'm teaching it to her as well. And the mantra says, I am strong, I am smart, I am kind, I am, and then they would say their name. So for example, I am Andy, and I can do anything. And then we continue to say, I value integrity, confidence, and leadership. And integrity is doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. Confidence is believing in yourself. And leadership is leading by example and thinking for yourself. And then we basically end the mantra, I have them end it with saying, I love myself and I am enough. And I have them repeat that a few times. And that mantra isn't just for them. It's for me too. It's a reminder to embody those same values, to live them, not just speak them. And let me tell you, running has been one of the best mirrors for all of it. It has taught me what pain really is, what consistency really asks of you, and how our identity is often outdated. Not because we can't become more, but because we've accepted an old version of ourselves for far too long and made that the the present, right? Like made that the baseline. You see, that first 10K, at around the 3 kilometer mark, I was already feeling my knees. I remember thinking, bro, like, there's no way, like, I have 7 kilometers to go and I'm gonna make this. And in those moments, right, or it's in those moments of pain that then the voices in my head started making their way through, telling me, yeah, Andy, I told you, like, you're not a runner, bro. Like, this was a bad idea. But I kept going because and I kept telling myself I can do hard things. And I lean on something very simple. And it was the evidence from, the trainings that I've been doing. Because for weeks I did 5K. And then when I decided to train for the 10K, I pushed to 6K and then I did that. And then I pushed to 7K and then I did that. And each week I proved to myself that I could do a little bit more, that I could do what felt hard, especially in the moment. And that belief that was building up, it's that helped carry me when my body was screaming like, yo, just stop. It's like, it's too much, right? Something shifted inside of me after finishing that first race, because I started asking myself, what even is a runner, like a long distance runner? Like, who other than myself told me that I wasn't one? And I remember looking up what the average 10 kilometer time, for regular people, for men was. And then I came across this quote in a reel that on Instagram that stuck with me. And it basically said something along the lines of, the average person doesn't run 10 kilometers. And that less than 5% of people, of the whole entire population ever will. And that even fewer, so even a smaller percentage consistently run without stopping. And that's when I realized I'm not average, and I don't have to be. And that story I kept repeating in my head of I'm not a runner, it was never even mine to begin with. It was fear that was basically talking on my behalf. And here's something that I believe with every fiber of my being is that confidence, it starts with belief in yourself. That's what I teach my kids. But sustainable confidence, and this is just from experience, right? Sustainable confidence grows from competence. And a quick definition of competence would tell you that competence, it's your ability to do something successfully or to do it efficiently, right? And so you become competent, so you become efficient, you become successful by doing and by repeating what you are doing, by getting the reps in, by stacking those moments when you didn't feel ready, but you showed up anyway. And when things get tough, you fall back on those moments like it's a foundation that you built, because that's what you are building, a foundation of experiences that you can rely on and that you can lean on and that you can fall back on. And that's why I keep running. And it's not just to finish races, but to keep building that quiet confidence, right? That comes from actually following through and pushing through. So boom, now I had already done my first 10K race, my first 10K event. Amazing. And imagine this, even though I finished it, even though I was proud of myself in that moment, can you imagine I still didn't really fully feel like a runner? I mean, I know I did it, right? But the doubts were still there. I was like, and maybe again, that's a competitor in me. Can I do this again? Can I actually now improve? Or was this just, luck? Okay. I mean, I knew I could. And I knew it wasn't just luck because I had been training, but I did really want to test myself if I could do this again. Now, I don't know about you, but I can be super competitive, like, especially like on the basketball court. It was like I was a different person, like a real dog, on the court. No, but like a true competitor where I always want to win, right? Or I just want to push myself at full capacity, to know that I was leaving it all out there. So I signed up for a second race shortly after I finished that first race that would take place in a couple months, right? So about 8 weeks the time I had to train. And so this time around, I made a plan. I used ChatGPT. I set up a running schedule. I decided, okay, I'm gonna push myself to run twice a week, not once, but not twice. One shorter run, one long run. It was something that I kind of came across, and so I thought, okay, whatever, let me do that. And on top of that, I basically stacked, my training plan with my kettlebell strength training and conditioning, to support my knees in between runs. So yeah, I stuck with that. I started training even when we went on vacation for a week. I locked in, summer vacation. It was hard because you're on vacation, and so you instantly automatically feel like, like it's time to rest. But I pushed through and I did what I had to do, and I had the family join in with some of the workouts, which was also cool, as well. And because I really wanted to approach it better this time, and actually give myself the opportunity to see what could be possible if I just stick to it and give myself the best chances possible, right? So then taper week came, and basically a taper week, if you ever hear this term in running, basically, yeah, maybe in any sport, it's that like final week or two before a race where you kind of dial down the distance that you're doing, but you basically keep up the intensity, so you're kind of like resting and prepping your body without like dropping everything just to rest, and you're basically keeping your body tuned up, right? Anyways, I remember one day during that taper week, I invited my son, who was 7 at the time. Yeah, 7. Or maybe he had just turned 8, you know, on a 6K run that I had to do. So he was on his bike, biking next to me the whole time. And as I was coming to the end of the run, I realized that I was about to run it faster than any 6K, any of my 6K runs before that. And I had just casually mentioned it to him, like, yeah, I'm about to run faster this time. And, when I mentioned it to him, maybe like 20 seconds after, he started saying, yo, Papa, it's really amazing what you're doing. Because just a few years ago, you had to start from zero again. Like, this is what my son told me at the time. And that comment, it had me a bit confused, because I wasn't so sure what he meant, right? So I was like, what do you mean, like, start from zero? And then he says, or he goes on to say, you remember when you had your knee injury, you had to operate on your knee, and then you had to learn to walk again, and you had to learn to sport and train again. Bruh, I had completely forgotten about that. Like, that injury was, I think it was like 5 years ago, but I probably only fully recovered like maybe just a little over 2 years ago. And that was a basketball injury where, like, I got properly messed up, like real good. It was like an ACL tear. So I had an ACL surgery, had to get it replaced. I had messed up my meniscus, bone bruising, months of pain and year-long rehab. I had to literally learn how to walk again. I couldn't help, you know, I couldn't help out with I remember at the time, like, I couldn't help out with my daughter the way that I wanted to, who was around 5 months at the time. I remember I had to crawl out of bed in the middle of the night. Like, I couldn't squat, I couldn't jump, like, and of course, at that time, I couldn't even imagine like running. And here I was now running consistent 6Ks and preparing for my second 10K run. And I was worried about improving my time, right? That comment from my son, like that comment stopped me in my tracks because it reminded me that oftentimes we forget how far we've come. Like we get so focused on what's next that we don't take time to celebrate like what's going on right now in front of us, or even to just acknowledge where we started. And it took my son, 7-year old at the time, to remind me of that. So it was in that moment I had a healthy reality check of like, whether I improve my 10K time or not, the simple fact that I'm even able to train, that I get to run again, that I can set an example for my kids. Like that is, and that will always be the real win. And, it was already, what I wanted to do with, giving them that, being that living example of what persistence and perseverance and grit looks like. So what I want to, leave you with from this story, from my story is, don't just track how far you have to go, right? Track how far you've come, right? Take time to look back, especially when you're doubting yourself, because sometimes the real goal isn't about time or about distance. It's also about the healing that you're going through or how to go through. It's about the consistency. It's about showing your kids what perseverance and grit and what heart, looks like. And proving to yourself that your past doesn't have to define your future. It can influence it, but it doesn't have to define your future. So before I close this out, I have to mention something that, still blows my mind to this day. Because you see, I ran the second 10K 2 months after my first race. And like I mentioned earlier, but I shaved off 5 minutes off of my time. From finishing 58 minutes and 25 seconds in my first race, all the way down to 52 minutes and 44 seconds. Like, that is still wild to me. I remember, like, I never saw myself as a runner. Yet somehow, here I am, running faster than I ever have. But now, guess what's happening? There's a new goal in town, and the goal is the half marathon. And that's going to be sometime next year in May. That's going to be 21 kilometers, basically 2 times, the 10K event in one shot, which again is still wild every time I think about it. Because even though I was better prepared for that second 10K race, running 2 times a week, and I ran it faster, it was still hard. Like, let me not make it seem like it wasn't. Like, it was still hard. At the end of that race, I was cooked, right? And even though I ran the 10K twice now, the idea of running a half marathon, it still feels right now impossible. Even though like I'm building up that self-belief, I still feel like I'm not sure, because during that second 10K event, I literally told myself, I don't know if 21 kilometers is in it for me with how this 10-kilometer feels already. But then I remember seeing this post on Instagram that really spoke to me. So, like I had to favorite it. So let me just pull it up. And it says, at first, 5 kilometers will scare you. Then a 10-kilometer will be hard. Then a half marathon. Then you learn to swim and bike. Then a standard triathlon. Then an Ironman 70.3. Then a full Ironman. And I thought this was so powerful because I could strongly resonate with the first parts of this, with the 5K scaring me and then the 10K feeling hard. And yet this quote encourages the idea of a triathlon and even doing an Ironman one day. But, listen, I'm just trying to get to that half marathon first and then survive that. Okay. But let me be positive and, and say not just survive, but I want to thrive, right? Like I want to thrive through it. But yeah, it's like every step unlocks a new part of you. And that's what I've learned, the most here. It's not about the distance, but about who you become while training for it. Whatever it may be for you. For me, it's running. And if you're a dad listening right now, a dad who is, 35 plus, or in his late 30s, early 40s, like, I'm speaking to you because maybe you've let your health slide, maybe you've lost your edge or feel like you're not modeling what you really want your kids to see. Maybe you've got multiple passions even, but the confidence you once had in yourself has taken a hit for whatever reason. And I just want you to know that, like, you're not alone in this, and you'll never be alone in this. And you're especially, like, you're not done. Like, the story is not over for you. And if you've fallen off track, or if you're doubting your abilities, or if you've hit a wall in your identity, in who you are, in who you were, or in who you want to be, like, just start small, brother. Like, start to rebuild your competence, right? Do something hard again, one step at a time, one rep at a time, one run at a time. I mean, for me, part of that now is running, but for you, it might be something else. Like, I don't know. But whatever it is, just know this, right? Just know that you are still capable of growth, that you are still capable of making progress. You can still become an example your kids will admire, even after setbacks, even after identity blocks, even after all the doubt that you may be experiencing. Because look, I'm 37 now, and I've set a goal, right? To run a full marathon before my 40th birthday. But the next milestone is my half marathon again next year in May somewhere. God spare life, right? But I'll be there if I'm well, if I'm fit and I'm healthy. And all I can think is that I hope you'll be walking or, running toward your own comeback too, just as I am going to be, walking and running toward my own complete comeback as a dad who's just trying to be the best that he can for himself and for his family.